Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Emily Johnson nervously adjusted her cheap white shirt in the elevator mirror. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she kept repeating to herself, "You can do this. You deserve this chance." She had just landed an interview at Technova Corp., one of New York's most prestigious tech companies, and it might have been his only chance to change his life. As she entered the grand lobby, she immediately felt the contrast between her simple attire and the sophisticated looks of the other applicants and staff. The gleaming white marble, the giant screens displaying technological innovations, and the subtle but expensive perfume in the air reminded her that she was far from her small apartment in Queens. The Human Resources Director Mr. Carlton received her with a polite smile, but his eyes betrayed a silent judgment. From the first minutes, Emily felt the weight of stares. Some whispered, others exchanged amused glances at her modest attire and slightly worn shoes. "So, Miss Johnson," Mr. Carlton began condescendingly, "tell us about your experience in the field." Emily took a deep breath and honestly shared her background: a few modest internships, a part-time job at a coffee shop, but an unwavering determination to learn and succeed. Mr. Carlton frowned. Interesting. But you do understand that Technova isn't looking for someone who's still learning. We need leaders." Then came the humiliating questions, punctuated by stifled laughter from the other staff members. "Are you sure you can keep up in a competitive environment? Your skills are, how can I say, limited for this type of position, aren't they?" Emily felt her cheeks burn. She looked down, but never left the room. Each word sounded like a blow. "You don't belong here." At the end of the interview, Mr. Carlton concluded coldly, "Thank you for coming. We will contact you, if we ever need a more suitable profile." Emily left the company with a heavy heart and tears in her eyes. On the street, the cold Manhattan wind whipped her face, and she said bitterly to herself, "That's who I am to them, just a simple, insignificant girl." But behind this humiliation, a flame began to burn within her. An inner voice whispered to her, "One day they will remember your name, and it will not be you who suffers the humiliation." That day, Emily Johnson vowed to transform her life, no matter what. And her journey from ridiculous to powerful was only just beginning. Emily Johnson returned to her small Queens apartment with a heavy heart but a head full of determination. She sat down on the worn couch, rested her hands on her knees, and took a deep breath. The light from the setting sun filtered through the curtains, illuminating the bare walls, as if to remind her that she still had to build her life from scratch. She thought back to the interview. The mocking looks, the humiliating questions, Mr. Carlton's condescending tone, all of it could have broken her. Yet, deep inside, an idea began to form: if I want to be respected, I must become someone impossible to ignore. The next day, Emily made a decision: she was going to invest in herself. She contacted the local business college and enrolled in night classes in business administration and management. Money was tight, but she knew that every dollar spent on her education was a step toward her goal. To cover expenses and support herself, she took a part-time job at a small local coffee shop. The long hours behind the counter, serving often impatient and demanding customers, could have seemed overwhelming. But Emily saw these moments as lessons in patience, communication, and handling difficult situations. One evening, while she was cleaning tables after a long day, an elderly customer smiled at her and said, "You have a determined look, my dear. Never let anyone tell you that you don't belong." Emily smiled weakly, but something inside her stirred. The words resonated deeply. This wasn't just about jobs or money. It was about dignity and destiny. Every day, between classes and coffee, Emily began researching the business world, reading CEO biographies, learning leadership strategies, and studying how companies thrived. She took notes, made plans, and most importantly, she turned every past humiliation into fuel for her ambition. Even though the road ahead was long and fraught with obstacles, Emily felt a newfound strength within her. The humiliation she had suffered at Technova was no longer a defeat, it had become a starting point, a clear signal that she must aim higher than anyone could have imagined. And, in the silence of her small apartment, she made a silent promise: one day I will come back, and they will finally know who I am. A few weeks after starting her night classes and working at the cafe, Emily felt she needed inspiration to turn her efforts into a real plan. One night, while browsing online videos for her research, she came across a TED Talk given by the current CEO of Technova Corp., Jonathan Carlyle. On screen, Carlyle spoke passionately about leadership, innovation, and courage in business. He discussed how every challenge can become an opportunity and emphasized the importance of giving hidden talents a chance. Emily stood there fascinated. Every word seemed to speak directly to her. Never let the doubts of others define your worth. Success belongs to those who dare to persevere. That evening, Emily picked up a notebook and began writing down her thoughts. She described her strengths, her weaknesses, her short- and long-term goals. She realized she no longer wanted to simply apply for a job. She wanted to create her own path, shape her own destiny, and one day return to the place where she had been humiliated, but this time, as a force impossible to ignore. In the following weeks, Emily intensified her efforts. Between her work at the cafe and her classes, she began taking online seminars on business strategy, marketing, and project management. She studied startups that had successfully transformed modest ideas into successful businesses. One evening, coming home late after a long day, she stopped in front of the window of a small business center and saw a bulletin board, a program for young entrepreneurs, offering mentorship and funding for innovative projects. Emily felt her heart race. It was exactly what she needed to move from theory to action. She jotted down the dates and conditions of the program, and for the first time since her humiliating interview, she felt a spark of real hope. Her goal was no longer a distant dream, it was beginning to take shape before her. Before going to bed that night, Emily whispered quietly, "One day, Technova will remember my name, and that day will come sooner than you think." That night, a new determination took root within her. She would never again be the simple girl who was ridiculed. She would learn, create, and fight, until no one could underestimate her anymore. As the weeks passed, Emily continued to juggle her job at the cafe, her evening classes, and her personal research. Although she had begun to accumulate theoretical knowledge, she felt a void. She needed practical advice, a guide who could help her turn her ambition into reality. One day at university she met M. Thompson, a professor of business and entrepreneurship known for helping several young people launch their own businesses. When she shyly introduced herself to him after class, he immediately noticed the passion in her eyes. "You seem determined," he said, adjusting his glasses. "But determination alone isn't enough. What do you really want to accomplish?" Emily recounted her story, from her humiliating interview at Technova to her dream of succeeding in the business world despite her humble background. Mr. Thompson listened attentively, nodding his head several times. "You know, Emily," he said finally, "what you're feeling is exactly what many people feel after being underestimated. The difference is what you do with that energy. If you channel your frustration into learning and action, you can reach heights those who ridiculed you wouldn't even dare to imagine." From that day on, Mr. Thompson became her mentor. He taught her advanced management, leadership, and decision-making strategies. He encouraged her to think strategically, analyze problems from different perspectives, and, above all, never let her emotions dictate her actions. They began working on a concrete project. Emily was to develop a plan to launch a small technology company capable of solving a real market problem. Mr. Thompson corrected her mistakes, highlighted her strengths, and encouraged her to present her ideas clearly and convincingly. One evening, after an intense work session, Emily remained alone in Mr. Thompson's office and whispered, "If I succeed, I don't just want to succeed for myself. I want to prove to all those who doubted me that you can change your destiny." Mr. Thompson smiled and said, "Emily, you've already started. The question now is how far you're willing to go." From that moment on, Emily felt her dream begin to transform into a concrete plan. She was no longer just a young woman humiliated by the business world. She had become a disciplined student, a budding strategist, ready to seize the slightest opportunity to change her life. After several months of intensive learning under Mr. Thompson's supervision, Emily felt she was ready to take action. Her classes, readings, and practical advice had forged a clear vision in her. She wanted to create something concrete, something that could compete with large companies, including Technova. One evening, in her small apartment, surrounded by notebooks, charts and notes, Emily sketched out her project. She wanted to launch a tech startup specializing in productivity solutions for small businesses. His idea, a simple, accessible and innovative platform that would allow any company to manage its tasks, personnel and finances from a single intuitive interface. Emily knew that the idea alone wouldn't be enough. She needed to convince investors, build a strong team, and develop a working prototype. Every night after her shift at the cafe, she coded, researched existing software, wrote business plans, and refined her pitch. Her savings were limited, but she invested every penny into her project. One Saturday morning, she met Sarah, a former classmate with a passion for digital marketing. Emily pitched her idea with infectious enthusiasm. Sarah, impressed, immediately agreed to join the adventure. Little by little, Emily recruited other talented people, a freelance developer, a graphic designer, and even a volunteer accountant who were convinced by her vision. The first prototype was born after several weeks of hard work. Emily organized a small presentation for a group of local investors. On the big day, she was nervous but determined. She took a deep breath, recalling the humiliations of the past and the promise she had made to herself, "One day they will know who I am." When she presented her project, the investors were surprised by the clarity of her vision, her mastery of the subject, and the elegant simplicity of her prototype. One of them, impressed, told her, "Emily, it's rare to see someone your age with such strategic understanding. You have real potential." The success of that first presentation gave Emily newfound confidence. For the first time since her humiliating interview at Technova, she felt that her destiny was no longer in the hands of others, it was in her own hands. As she walked home that evening, she allowed herself a small smile. Every past failure, every ridicule, and every doubt hadn't disappeared, but they had become cornerstones on which she built her success. This is just the beginning, she thought. One day, I won't just be able to. I'll be indispensable. A few months later, Emily's startup had begun to gain traction. Her simple yet effective app had attracted several local small businesses, and word of mouth was starting to take hold. However, unexpected news disrupted her plans. Technova was going through a major crisis. A strategic project had failed, investors were worried, and the board of directors was desperately looking for solutions to turn the company around. Emily saw an opportunity. This wasn't just about personal revenge anymore. She could use her skills and project to demonstrate her value in a real, large-scale context. After all, that was exactly what Mr. Thompson had taught her, to seize the moment when her abilities could create the greatest impact. So she plucked up her courage and sent an email to Technova's strategy department. She proposed a free consultation, accompanied by a summary of his project and how his platform could improve productivity and solve certain structural problems in the company. A few days later, Emily received a surprising response. She was invited to present her project directly to the board of directors. Memories of her humiliating interview resurfaced. Mr. Carlton and several board members rarely left their offices to meet with young talent. This time, she wouldn't be just another candidate, she was now an expert with a concrete project. On the day of the meeting, Emily walked into the large conference room, her presentation on her laptop. The faces of those who had humiliated her were before her, and some exchanged surprised glances. She felt a pang of satisfaction, but remained focused. When her turn came, she spoke with clarity, confidence, and precision. She explained how her platform could solve Technova's internal management challenges, reduce costs, and improve productivity. Every word was carefully weighed, every technical demonstration perfectly orchestrated. At the end of his presentation, an unusual silence filled the room. Then, one of the board members, a skeptical investor, said, "Emily, that's impressive. You've identified problems we didn't know about and proposed concrete solutions. How did you achieve this level of understanding so quickly?" Emily smiled slightly and replied confidently, "By learning from my mistakes, by listening to those who know, and above all, by never letting failures define me. For the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of humiliation lift. She was no longer the shy, ridiculed young woman, she was a force to be reckoned with, and Technova had just discovered it. A few days after her presentation to the board, Emily was invited to a series of meetings with various departments within Technova to implement her strategic plan. Each meeting was an opportunity to showcase her skills, but also to confront those who had humiliated her months earlier. At the first meeting with the marketing department, Mr. Carlton was present. His icy stare left no doubt, he perfectly remembered the young woman he had ridiculed. Some employees whispered behind her back, perhaps waiting for her to stumble. Emily, however, remained calm. She presented her ideas with clarity and precision, detailing how each element of her project could generate measurable results. She anticipated their questions, provided concrete examples, and demonstrated her complete mastery of every aspect of the strategy. At one point, Mr. Carlton tried to unsettle her. "You're very ambitious, Emily. But are you really ready to run a business of this size?" Emily looked him straight in the eye and replied confidently. "I don't claim to know how to do everything. But I know how to identify problems, listen to experts, and implement effective solutions. And that's exactly what Technova needs now." A murmur of admiration rippled through the room. The employees who had once mocked her exchanged surprised glances. Her confidence and competence contrasted with the timidity they knew. At the next meeting with the finance department, another former colleague tried to put her down with a condescending tone. "It's not the role of a young consultant to tell us how to manage our finances." Emily responded calmly, presenting detailed analyses, numerical projections, and practical solutions to redress the deficit. The impressed board members took notes and asked Emily pertinent questions, validating her proposals. At the end of the day, she left Technova with a strange feeling. Revenge wasn't manifested in the humiliation of others, but in the silent respect she had just earned. Those who had belittled her now looked at her differently. In the taxi ride home, Emily reflected on the journey. Every humiliation, every mockery, every tear shed had led her to this moment. She understood that her strength lay not in revenge, but in her ability to transform pain into power. And in a breath, she murmured, "This is just the beginning. One day, I'll be the one making the decisions here, and no one will be able to stop me." The following weeks marked the beginning of Emily's rise within Technova. Her innovative ideas and ability to solve complex problems quickly made her an essential asset to the company. Former skeptics, including Mr. Carlton, could no longer ignore her talent. Emily was first promoted strategic project manager, a position that allowed her to oversee the implementation of her solutions across different departments. She now managed teams, coordinated resources, and accurately tracked results. Her method was simple but effective: listen to experts, analyze data, and make informed decisions. As the months passed, her successes multiplied. The projects she led improved productivity, reduced costs, and strengthened the company's reputation with investors. Meetings that had previously intimidated her became moments in which she shone, captivating everyone's attention with her clarity and determination. One day at a board meeting, CEO Jonathan Carlyle spoke. "Emily, your work has transformed several departments and restored confidence in our investors. I propose that you be promoted to Director of Operations." A mixture of pride and gratitude filled Emily. She thought of her humble departure, her humiliating interview, and all the nights spent working alone in her small apartment. Every tear, every doubt, every effort had brought her this far. With her new role, Emily now had the power to implement large-scale change. She transformed the company's internal culture, valuing talent, creativity, and integrity over appearance or seniority. Former colleagues who had mocked her now found themselves both admiring and respectful. Yet Emily remained humble. She knew that her true revenge was not to belittle those who had humiliated her, but to succeed with dignity, letting her actions speak for her. One evening, leaving her office late after a busy day, she looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline. The lights from the buildings twinkled like stars, and Emily felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Her climb wasn't over, but she was on the right track. Soon, she thought, I will no longer just be the one who saves projects. I will be the one who decides the future of this company. A few months after her promotion to Director of Operations, Emily Johnson organized the first major conference to present Technova's results and innovations since its crisis. The event was followed by investors, the media, and all employees. For Emily, this moment was symbolic. It was not only an opportunity to showcase her skills, but also to prove, silently but powerfully, to all those who had mocked her that she had gotten her revenge, not through humiliation, but through excellence and achievement. As she took the stage, the lights shone on her. The eyes that had once judged her were once again upon her, but this time with curiosity, astonishment, and, for some, a touch of respect mixed with surprise. Emily began her presentation calmly and confidently. Thank you all for being here. Today, we are not just celebrating numbers, but the transformation of Technova, through innovation and collaboration. She demonstrated the results of her projects, a significant increase in productivity, considerable cost savings for the company, and a technology platform now adopted by several strategic partners. Every graph, every number, demonstrated her effectiveness and her vision. During the presentation, several former colleagues whispered among themselves. I didn't think she was at this level. I never thought she could handle this. Emily, aware of all the stares, continued without hesitation. She knew that her true revenge was not in words, but in the concrete impact of his work. At the end of the conference, the applause was long and heartfelt. CEO Jonathan Carlyle, sitting in the front row, stood up and congratulated her. Emily, your work not only saved the company, but also inspired all of us. You turned a crisis into an opportunity. Emily left the stage with a slight smile. For her, this achievement meant more than a professional victory, it was proof that perseverance, intelligence, and integrity always overcome humiliation and mockery. As she walked home that evening, she thought back to the mocking faces of the past and whispered, "You haven't stopped me, and you never will." This moment sealed her reputation within Technova. She was no longer just a young woman who had been humiliated. She had become a model of success, respected and admired by all. As the months passed, Emily continued to impress the board with her vision and effectiveness. Each project she led solidified her reputation as a skilled and strategic leader. She had earned not only the respect of her employees, but also the complete trust of investors and CEO Jonathan Carlyle. Then came the unexpected announcement. Carlyle had decided to retire for personal reasons. The company was at a crossroads, and the board needed to choose a new CEO capable of continuing the transformation Emily had initiated. Emily felt a familiar tension. This time, it wasn't fear or doubt, it was the excitement of a challenge that would allow her to realize all her efforts. However, some board members remained cautious, wondering if she had the experience to run the entire company. At the pivotal meeting, Emily was invited to present her vision for Technova's future. She entered the conference room with a determined look on her face and outlined an ambitious but realistic plan: international expansion, adoption of innovative technologies, improvement of internal culture, and commitment to social responsibility. Each argument was supported by data, concrete results, and a clear implementation strategy. She spoke calmly, convincingly, and clearly, capturing the attention of every board member. At the end of his presentation, there was silence. Then, Carlyle spoke. Emily, since your arrival, you have not only saved Technova, but you have also demonstrated exceptional leadership. Your vision, courage, and perseverance make you the ideal candidate to become our next CEO. The council members nodded, impressed and convinced. Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She thought back to that first day of humiliation, to all the hours spent working in the shadows, and to every obstacle overcome. With humility and determination, she replied, "Thank you for your trust. I promise to lead Technova with integrity, innovation, and respect for every member of this company. Together, we will write a new chapter in its history." The council voted unanimously. Emily Johnson, the once humiliated and underestimated young woman, was now the new CEO of Technova Corp. That day, Emily realized that her revenge had never been about revenge. She had proven that competence, perseverance, and integrity could transform pain and humiliation into fate-changing power. On the day she took office, Emily Johnson entered her office for the first time as PDG de Technova Corp. The office walls, once intimidating to her, were now a symbol of her success. The large bay windows let in the light of Manhattan, illuminating her new role and the responsibilities that came with it. She reviewed her priorities for her first months: improving internal communication, strengthening innovation, supporting emerging talent, and transforming the company into a place where merit and integrity were valued. Every decision she made would be guided by the lessons learned from her journey: never underestimate the potential of others and turn obstacles into opportunities. At her first meeting with all the executives, she spoke with confidence and inspiration. Technova isn't just a company. It's a community. A community where talent, creativity, and perseverance are recognized and rewarded. We're building a future where everyone can excel, regardless of their background or origins. The employees listened to her with admiration. Many remembered the simple and humble young woman they had seen working in the early days of the company. Today, she was a respected and admired leader, embodying living proof that determination and hard work could transform a life. Emily hadn't forgotten her past. The humiliations, the mockery, and the doubts were etched in her memory, not as wounds, but as lessons and strengths. She knew that her role was not only to lead Technova, but also to inspire thousands of young women and men to believe in themselves and never give up on their dreams. A few months later, Technova was thriving like never before. Teams were working with motivation, innovative projects were multiplying, and Emily had established a culture of respect and excellence. In an interview with a business magazine, she said, "Success is never a matter of luck. It's a matter of perseverance, courage, and the will to get back up every time you fall." Sitting at her desk, looking out at the city before her, Emily smiled. She had transformed humiliation into strength, ridicule into motivation, and her dreams into reality. She had become the CEO she had always dreamed of being, and his story would continue to inspire those who dared to believe in themselves, no matter what. "I'm finally where I'm meant to be, and I have no intention of stopping."